I will start by passing it over to our moderator, who is Dr. Jen DeWitt. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for moderating today, Jen.
Yes, thank you. And thanks to our speakers who will be enlightening us as we go on. And as Chris said, we know from years of research, the research that I've done and others on the Aspires project, looking at science aspirations and interest and identity over time, as well as a lot of other related research, that interest is not enough. Passion isn't enough. It's not enough just to, if we just get them passionate enough, then that will bridge that gap. And in fact, we know that this is the case also for space science. And in fact, that, you know, it seems like a number of years ago, there'd been this hope that with something that's so interesting and so exciting, maybe this doing-being divide, this difference between being interested and excited about science and inspired by science, and then having that kind of translate into aspirations, it might play out differently. And that doesn't seem to be the case. And in fact, space science, because it does the inspiration, the passion, the awe and wonder so well, that may almost be exacerbating the issue, that something that's so big and exciting, you might be really passionate about it, but it really sets it apart as something that's probably not for me. And so I think, you know, hopefully some of our speakers today will be kind of getting into the case of space science and what else might be done, because as we know, and as we titled the seminar, interest is not enough. So with that very brief introduction, we can hand it over to, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the first speaker, Shaaron, oh my gosh, Shaaron, I'm going to probably mispronounce your name. So I'm just going to say Shaaron from Explorative and Our Space, Our Future, as well as the Association of Science and Discovery Centers, all kind of Bristol centered, and who's going to be talking about, again, some of the early findings that are relevant to this from the evaluation of our space, our future, around this whole, kicking off this whole theme about, you know, interest. Given that interest is not enough, what might we maybe do differently?
Thank you so much, Jen. I love this idea, actually, that perhaps because space science is so awesome and so out there and so fully immersive, and that it actually causes problems for itself. So I think that kind of tension between the two, you know, relevant and personal and awe-inspiring, is a really interesting area of research, which Jen pointed out there, which I've jotted down for future reading. But I thought I'd just do a very quick whiz through what our space is all about. Hopefully you can see my slides. Is that okay? Great. You never know. So yes, as Jen said, my name's Shaaron. I'm delighted to be part of this webinar. Interest is not enough. I work with Explorative, which is one of the delivery partners of the Horizon 2020 program, Our Space, Our Future. And I'm also the current CEO at the UK Association for Science and Discovery Centres. I thought I'd start with this quote because it's something that has sort of guided me in my areas, from the TISME studies back in 2013. In actual fact, we'd already known, oh, sorry, let me grab that there. We'd already known for a while that our science education and engagement practices had been unconsciously or consciously excluding whole sections of society. And the range of students who felt that they were able to contribute and engage with science or consider it an aspirational goal for their future was not so diverse. And all the evidence from the work Jen was involved with, the science capital and the development of the science capital teaching approach, such a robust piece of evidence that we felt that this program desperately needed to take on those learnings to support the children who had lower levels of science experience and science knowledge and values and connections in their bag, so to speak. So the vision as a consortium is of a society that enables and empowers all students, regardless of gender, ethnicity, disability, or socioeconomic background, to consider a career related to space science as a relevant, attainable, and exciting aspiration for their future. And at heart, this is an outreach program that works with a multiple engagement model. So the same students many times, to build that trust and relationship and support this identity shift, the identity change for students who really don't currently feel that science is for them. Primarily, we want to take an evidence-informed approach. So our first step after, after a period of audience development and looking for, how do I say, like meaningful understanding of diversity and underserved audiences in the 5 regions. So in Denmark, England, Italy, Portugal, and Wales, we did an in-depth literature review to ask this question of what seems to work already, and build this into our designed activities. And the review took over 1,100 reports and published studies about space and astronomy science engagement interventions through a selection process, a critical appraisal, to find sort of a final 16 robust studies, from which we distilled these 3 key recommendations. So yeah, we need to promote inquiry-based skills. So higher order skills like problem solving, critical thinking, really forefront these real, genuine science skills. We need to engage with the teachers and the wider influencers. And this is really key. So we've been leading from a more holistic whole school approach, bringing in other departments, trying to bust through those sort of silos that science is one distinct lesson, bringing in higher management and buy-in from senior management, and also bringing in carers and parents and families in our interaction and celebration events. But the one that really resonates across the literature was this idea of make it relevant. So personalization, localization, again, going back to the science capital approach. And that led us to push for a more sort of co-creation during the content development, perhaps where students were leading the direction and the choices of what science is explored from their own experience, but also extends to making sure that the role models we have are relevant and the careers that we discuss are relevant. But it's hard to be honest, it's hard to avoid the easy wins or replicating the same delivery techniques that only reach and land with the science engaged students. So as a delivery partner, as we've just started delivery, we have been really challenged actually to constantly stay aware of our own biases, and support this wider involvement and inclusion and confidence for the students we're seeing. So we're all in delivery at the moment, and whether we make a difference with something that's designed to make a difference is obviously a huge deal, but we have already taken some baseline data. And so I wanted to share with you, as Jen mentioned, some of our early findings from this. And this is thanks to our researcher on this project, Sophie Bartlett, who is from Cardiff University and is gutted that she can't actually be with us today. So just to show you some of the tools we've been using for the students. So these are lovely postcards to fill in. And the students fill them in before and after. And they've got a few questions on different measures. So some of them are looking at the general interest the students have in space science, the perceived relevance, the accessibility of space science, and then measures of possible selves and future aspirations. So whether or not they see themselves as capable and having the potential to go into space science, and whether they desire to go into a space science career. And there have been some lovely kind of ways in which we wanted to track the data. So we can't ask for names, full names. For GDPR, we wanted to create something new. So Sophie came up with this. This is a find your space science job role. So I'd encourage all of you to put in the chat actually what your space scientist job role is. And that's the way we track the students from before and after data points. So I am what am I? Gravity. I am a gravity technician. There you go. There's some really lovely combinations actually that I wish I could be in real life. So we have got, we're hoping to get up to 5,000 or so baseline data points. The first gather by the 31st of March was 1,365, and you can see pretty even in terms of male and female, and the majority of the students that were targeted, depending on the audience development plans in the different regions, mainly fell between the ages of 11 to 13. So these are the student responses. So this is the really interesting part, I think. So these statements are ordered according to, so the highest percentage of I agree or I strongly agree with this statement are at the top. Okay, so you can see that, and you can see the highlighted there is the percentage there of those agree and strongly agree. So you can see the top statements are relating to their interest in space science, and also its importance to global society as well, which is really promising. So the top scorer is that people from different countries work in the space industry, that discoveries in space science are important to society, and that space science is interesting. Unsurprisingly, most negative were where students disagreed or strongly disagreed. At the bottom there, the intention to pursue a career in space science. And there was interesting detail in this data as well. For example, I'll just double check, but yes, the male students indicated a more favorable response compared to the female students for most of these answers, for most of these areas, including a stronger agreement with the statement that important space discoveries were made by men. And yes, the potential to pursue a career in space science or desire to do that also has this gender bias. So this is our baseline data. Watch this space as our research project continues. We'll soon have a larger number of these postcards from before and after, and it will be really exciting to see where the shifts are, where perhaps we could focus our efforts, right? So where we can catalyze these deeper identity changes for students. But also of interest is the comparison with space awareness. So yet another project that Jen was involved with and could talk much better on this. But this is a really robust piece of evidence as well. And here on this slide, you can see the space awareness data is in brackets underneath the our space, our future data. And you can actually see that space awareness student cohort showed slightly more positive attitudes towards 5 out of the 6 statements that were the same. So where there was crossover, we designed it so that there would be crossover with this big area of research, but very similar responses all in all, which is very promising in terms of the robustness for our data. They are also indicative that European students' views and perceptions towards space science are potentially unchanged in the past 4 years. And from top to bottom, it really emphasizes this point that enjoyment and interest in space science is not enough. So this is the challenge we face. This is the focus of this webinar. So I'll pass back to Jen and the other speakers, and thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Shaaron. Yeah, and yet another name check for me. Thank you. Yeah, it's nice to have an ego boost on a Monday morning. But yes, so now we will move on to, oh, okay. Sorry, Zoom thing that came up and I got confused. It is Monday morning. So now we'll turn it over to Samantha Borley from the Institute of Physics, and looking again at sort of physics, perhaps, in particular, but also with, putting that in the context of space as well. And obviously it goes without saying for everybody here, but I'm going to say it anyway, that the relationship between, when you break it down, sort of how school science tends to be divided up into, biology, chemistry, physics, that physics is the one that's most closely aligned with engineering, space science, that sort of thing. So that's a particular relevant findings that are, and we see this also in other areas of research as well, that findings, if we don't have research on space science in particular, physics is a good place to look for things that may be comparable for lessons to learn. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Sam. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Jen. Yes, so let me share my screen. Okay, and let's just confirm. I can't see any cameras. Can someone confirm to me in the chat that you can see it? Oh, Chris, great, thank you very much. Right, yes, so good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Jen. So I work for the Institute of Physics here in the UK. I am the head of education in Wales. So the Institute of Physics at the moment is very interested in trying to find out who our underrepresented groups are in the physics community and to correct that. So we've launched our Limitless campaign, which you can have a look at on the internet. My personal experience in Wales, we've been running our Improving Gender Balance project to try and encourage more girls into physics. And as Shaaron said, this is taking a whole school inclusion approach. So it's not just talking to physics teachers and physics students and trying to get them on board, but it's looking at the whole school as a whole, teachers, students, management, families, community, and also, in fact, all subjects, so not just physics, but whether it's drama and childcare, where the boys are opting not to pick those subjects, even if they have that interest, because if we look at everything as a whole, we're much more likely to change that societal effect. So that's what I've been up to. And yes, so what I want to go through today, as Jen said, space and physics are interrelated, and a lot of what I'm saying, although it's specific to physics today, is very much applicable to space, whether that's picking that as a qualification in school or whether that's looking at careers. So I'll go through who we have found to be the underrepresented groups of students. This is specific to the UK, so it's definitely worth in other countries looking at your local area, whether you're a teacher in a school, looking at your data or looking at your national data to see if you have similar underrepresented groups, who you should be targeting to help get into space. And then we'll look at what the roadblocks are to choosing physics as a subject, what our students have told us is stopping them, and again, what the data says, and then how we're looking to address these issues. So I've mentioned a whole school inclusion approach already, but other things that we've identified that need to be fixed in order to get those students fairly represented. So I am going to spit out lots of stats at you, but I also want to tell the stories of our students. So there's going to be quite a few quotes telling you exactly why they've struggled to pick physics, what stopped them as we go along. So I'll start with gender, because that's our greatest experience, although we are now, again, looking at all underrepresented groups. You can look on the IOP website for our Limitless report, which gives even more statistics if you're so inclined. So in 2020, physics was the second most popular A-level subject for boys. So A-level being the advanced education, 16 to 18 in the UK. For girls, it's the 15th most popular subject. So we're going from second to boys to 15th for the girls. And in fact, more girls get an A grade in psychology than take physics. So there's a clear disparity there between girls being free to choose that subject. And we really need to understand why they're stopping themselves from taking that. Yeah, over half of male A-level students enroll in some sort of STEM subject. For girls, it's 37%. So again, a drop down. And with all of these groups, there's a lot of intersection. So the problem is even greater for girls from poorer backgrounds. Girls from poorer backgrounds are 8 times less likely than a boy from a non-disadvantaged background to pick physics. There's a huge gap there. So we really need to be encouraging these groups in. Ethnicity is another issue. So in this table, I won't go through it in too much detail, but this shows how the disparity has been identified. So you've got the 16 to 19 demographic that shows the breakdown of an ethnic group compared to the overall population. And then the breakdown of who's taking the physics A level there. So to give you an idea, white British ethnic group, I think, is about 76% of the UK demographic, or Wales and England demographic, and they're also around about the same, about 76% of those taking physics A levels are from a white British background. So we say that's a representation factor of 1, a fair representation from that population. So you can see that of the ethnic groups that I've identified as being underrepresented here, Black Caribbean ethnic group is by far and away severely underrepresented in the physics community. there seems to be some sort of roadblock for students of those groups looking to take the subject. So again, this is an area that we've identified and that we're working against now. Social background is another identifier. So you can generally see that the more deprived background that you have, the far less likely you are to take physics at A level. And then the converse is true. So the more financially secure your family is, the much more likely you are to take physics as an A level. This is a specific issue in Wales as well, where we do have deep pockets of socioeconomic deprivation. And if you were to go to perhaps a local town or village in the valleys, for example, and suggest that they pick space as a career to a student, that student may look at you as though you were from outer space yourself, because a lot of these students don't think beyond their local geographic area, and they're just looking at what their families are doing for careers and following suit. So this is a huge issue for us here in Wales. Disability is another stopper for picking physics for A level and beyond. So we've got lots of stories. This is Ravneet, who has come through and beaten the odds, as it were, to come and join the physics community, because she's severely visually impaired and has come against barrier. Really unfortunate. Just even things like accessing larger text for exam papers and so on has been so difficult, but her passion has led her to fight against this and join the physics community. And there are obviously so many stories of students that have come up against that and just given up because it's too difficult, and because they didn't feel that their spot in the physics community was there waiting for them. They didn't see themselves there. The other issue as well is trying to identify the data that backs all of this up. So it's easier to pick out statistics about gender, about who is taking physics, who isn't. But when you start looking at other groups, so disability, for example, well, we know that for physics undergrads, 13% of physics undergrads in the UK had a known disability, compared to 19% of working age adults. So there is that disparity there. We don't know for other groups necessarily what the level of disparity is. So LGBT plus groups may be well underserved, but we just don't have the data because this isn't being recorded in schools. So we're trying to look at a wider range of groups and work with them to understand what their issues are, picking physics beyond what I've identified here. So I apologise for this terrible pun. This is looking at what roadblocks are being experienced. Obviously, my experience is in Wales. This is a photo that I took on holiday in Wales of a Welsh roadblock. So just to, I have to explain my own joke, apologies. So we've got a list of the types of roadblocks that were being experienced for students to take, to choose to take physics at A level and beyond. So they've already got that interest, but what things beyond their passion are influencing them to choose or not choose the subjects. So a misconception of what physics is. Some young people will be put off by misconceptions, which they're shaped by the opinions of other people, such as their family, friends, local community, and the information that people just see around them in the wider global community. So students are often told physics is too difficult, it's not creative, it's boring, just a lack of understanding of what physics and how exciting it is. And that physics is too difficult misconception has wide-reaching effects. So physics as a whole does suffer somewhat from the belief that it is only for the most intelligent students. You have to be getting A grade levels to even consider taking it. You need to be top of your class. Why? Why? Physics is a valuable subject for a student with other aspirations. So whether they're perhaps fairer to expect lower grade qualification, it can still be an entry through to apprenticeships, for example, and physics can be useful for a wide range of apprenticeships, and it has gendered consequences as well. So a boy who has mid-grade expectations for physics is still far more likely to say, I can still do it and pick the subject, than a girl with comparable grades. She's going to say, no, it's just the top students that take it. I am not that. That is not me. I don't see me in that group, and then not take the subject. Unconscious bias, and then that perception that physics or a career in space is not for the likes of me. I don't see my identity there. And that can come, unfortunately, from some educators making assumptions about young people based on ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, social background, and so on, rather than who they are as individuals. So there may be teachers that say, right, I see you're a smart boy sat at the front of the class. I'm going to focus on you when I'm talking about here's what you can do with physics, rather than look at your students and say, well, here's a student who's got a great curiosity and loves to know how the world works. You are a perfect candidate to take physics. There's a bit of a disparity there sometimes. And it can be an unconscious bias as well. So the stories that I've put in front of you show that this does still happen, unfortunately. There is a mold sometimes of who a physicist is or who works in the space career. So topically this week, I don't look like Richard Branson, therefore I don't have a career in space. I don't look like Elon Musk. It's not for me. And that's so incorrect. And we really need to make sure that we're not thinking of that mold when we're encouraging the perfect candidates for physics to go on and take that subject. So lack of careers guidance is a big one for me personally. And this is shouted out from us in Wales from our Improving Gender Balance project, that people just aren't really aware of the types of careers that you can go on to have, having had a physics background. And I was a bit guilty of this, having done physics myself. I thought, right, I don't know what to do now. I could be a teacher, or I'm not sure. I don't see myself in academia. I don't want to be an engineer. What am I going to do? And actually found there's a wealth of careers out there, and chose to go into sustainability and energy first of all, before joining the Institute of Physics. So yeah, when talking to students in Wales, girls in particular list careers as a big influencing factor to what subjects they pick. So especially for A-level, they will pick the subjects that specifically help them for the career that they've already targeted in their mind. Boys are slightly more likely to just pick subjects that they know that they're good at and that they enjoy, where girls seem to be a little bit more targeted. So we need to make sure that throughout school that we're giving them the career information in advance, so that they know that actually I want to work in the space industry and that physics will help me, for example. Few visible role models. So this is something that globally I think we're quite guilty of, and we need to make sure that these underrepresented groups are able to see themselves in the physics community, whether that's seeing people of colour or seeing more women as physicists out there on TV, in social media, in textbooks, on posters on the wall in schools. We need to get that out there. We need to be working with wide groups to fix that. And also a lack of support from families and communities. So I've already touched on it's not for the likes of me. It is also an issue. It's not for the likes of you. From an early age, young people are exposed to opinions of a variety of people in their homes and communities, and the internet and so on. And we need to make sure that those stories are correct, that the families feel enabled to say, yes, go take physics. I think you'd be great doing that. Oh, take physics. You could be a wonderful space architect. I love to make up the job titles on the fly. Go off and do that and have that support. And even you think of physicists that you may see on fictional TV shows or medicine programs, CSI, those scientists often, the stories that are told are that discoveries and breakthroughs are usually the results of physicists or scientists working in isolation. And it's usually an older white man hunched over a table. He's a bit of a maverick and comes up with a solution by himself, when actually the physics community, discoveries are made in teams with good collaboration and teamwork, and we need to change that message there so that children understand that there's a great team for them to jump into. So these are some of the roadblocks that are being experienced, and there are a wider range out there, and it can change from school to school, from community to community. We need to work with each of these groups to understand why they're not choosing the subjects, and if there's anything we can do to overcome those. So how do we overcome these issues? I mentioned we, and it is a global we. So we talk about families and communities having an effect, social media, and then a big one for me, obviously, is the effect of schools and teachers and peers. So with families and communities, we need to help enable these to challenge the stereotypes and biases that limit their children's opportunities and choices based on who they are. We need to get companies helping to support their employees to go do outreach. So if a company is employing a physicist who wants to go and help their local community, they go back to their school and help the girls or their fellow students of colour and say, here I am you, to go out and put that message. They need to be enabled by their companies to do that. So especially from those underrepresented groups, and so that those employees can go out and be those role models. For those whose day-to-day work is in STEM outreach, I suspect there's a few people listening in today, going out there, promoting the benefits of physics and ensuring that your activities are relevant to families from underrepresented groups as well. So again, identifying those underrepresented groups from your areas, talking to them, what are their local issues? How does space or physics tie into solving those? So more and more young students are interested in, say, climate change, or they're interested in the inequity in their local area, and how can we build in physics to help them solve those problems for them as part of that global network. Social media, so more high quality, accurate physics related content on social media platforms. So again, perhaps companies can help their employees to be that role model on social media. Also get more physicists to create that content out there that's targeted for underrepresented groups and get it to them. So lots of things we can do there, and that we're starting to do through the Institute of Physics. I mentioned media, so more accurate depictions of physicists from a diverse range of backgrounds. Let's not be the answer to the question when we ask kids, what does a scientist look like? That it's that person in a lab coat in a room by themselves, that's a certain colour, a certain age, and has wacky hair. Although I'm fine to keep the wacky hair, but I welcome people from all follicled backgrounds. And then the important factor for me is schools. We need to make sure every single school has access to great STEM teachers, and teachers that have that qualification in physics, because we have, again in Wales in particular, not every physics teacher is a physics specialist, so we need to get that corrected. We need really great careers information for schools, because I think 40% of students that we've worked with identify teachers and careers guidance in schools as having a massive impact on what subjects and what careers that they're looking at. So we've mentioned all of this wide range, but schools have a big impact on the type of subjects and careers that are being picked. Get businesses on board. So what businesses do you have in the local area of your school? What are they working on? Can we get them in, and can we get that representation as well? into the schools, so that the students can see the kind of things that they can go on to, and it's not just that you're going back to London, for example, for Wales to work, and there's no science being done in Wales, when that's not the case. Let the children understand what it is that they can do. Diversify the curriculum, get it out there, focus it on, again, perhaps a subject that's near to where they are. So in South Wales, we have a lot of technology going on along the M4 corridor. Get those businesses in and perhaps base some of the curriculum around the work there. And then just equip schools to challenge all forms of biases and stereotypes, and reward the schools that manage to do that well and share that best practice. Again and again, you ask a teacher, do you have any biases? Do you treat all your students the same? And of course they say yes. And I have my own biases as well, unconsciously, that you don't realize you do. And it's trying to help train and teach students and teachers and school management that actually it can be there and it's okay. You know, it's never an attack. It's right, we've identified, actually, perhaps I've been referring to a scientist as a he more often than not, and I need to correct that in a non-threatening way. So there's plenty that we can do, and there's a lot of stuff that, again, we're doing in our projects with the Institute of Physics around that, and now we're looking to go beyond gender to look at ethnic groups, socioeconomic backgrounds, and so on. So the work continues, whether it be physics or space. So thank you very much for listening to me. I'll end the screen share, and I'll pass back to Jen now, as soon as I can turn that off. Thank you, Jen.
Great. So thanks very much for that, Sam. Definitely one thing that it puts me in mind of that I'm going to kind of throw out there, even at this point, to discuss later, is I'd be really interested to hear what Institute of Physics or anyone else is doing to address the systemic issues that are really underpinning a lot of this. Sort of the field of physics itself is still very masculine, and how you kind of negotiate those tensions and what you do, the pressures on schools, you know, that are outside the policy issues, the education specifications, all that, you know, which you touched on. So I'd love to hear more about what they're doing to actually address the issues within the field of physics itself, that are then sort of underpinning all of those the other issues that you're seeing. So anyway, right. So we want to then move on to Clara Cruz, who very kindly pronounced her surname for us. Even though I have a Dutch surname, I am far from Dutch, and well, not for generations, and don't speak it, so I'm not going to try. But anyway, to talk about some particular initiatives within schools, and you know, and how they're sort of grappling with some of this as well. So I will, without further ado, because we're now running slightly behind, so hand that over to you, Clara. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jen. Let me try to share my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, but it's showing as like a slide, or the slide view rather than the presentation view. But I think, yeah, if you click maybe from the—
It's coming?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Let's see.
No?
Or if you click the little thing down at the bottom, the little—
Yeah, I did.
That one, yeah, try that. Sometimes that works. That should work.
Let me see.
No, it was working before. We tested.
Yeah.
It's working now or not? No.
No, it's up.
Let me try to share again. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Good.
There you go. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. So my name is Clara Cruz. I work at the European Space Agency in the Education Office. So where do we come from? It's very interesting to be at this meeting because, of course, we don't do research in education. We look at research in education to advise us in what is the way that we have to go. We also, of course, are backed by an European space program, and we consult with national delegations on their vision for what is the role that ESA should play in supporting careers in space in the future and STEM careers. So this is where we come. So the presentation is going to really talk about this European perspective because we are the European Space Agency, and the aim of ESA is, of course, to assure that the European Space Program is accomplished, and how we tackle this with a bottom-up approach, focusing on national initiatives. So this is our approach is not a central approach. We do, of course, have a team that coordinates activities centrally, which I'm part of, but we really focus, and our biggest effort in STEM education is really national. So we have seen now, due to the climate change movement, the sustainability movement, a huge shift in the interest of youth to get involved in climate-related issues, in sustainability, in resources issues. So this is an opportunity. We see that youth, and funny enough, sometimes they don't understand well the data. They get information. They think, yes, this is very important, but they don't see the connection between this data and the science behind what is being told and what they are learning at school. And it's true that STEM education sometimes has difficulty to connect to the, let's say, the big issues of society and the change that we are seeing. So our question always is, how can we also, I would say, I would talk about ESA, how can we as an European Space Agency change how STEM is taught at school? So we face huge changes. We face the challenges and changes in the world. We see, I mean, it was mentioned before by the previous speakers that we really need to focus on other methodologies. Of course, we have inquiry-based, we have project-based, we have learning by design. We have a lot of methodologies that have been tested in the last decades that have proven very effective. I would say not only one methodology fits all. And we see also in the different member states, what we call member states, different countries, they adopt or they have a preference for different methodologies and different contents. But we really see a shift and a need to a very much more student-focused methodology. Also, of course, society as a whole has been confronted, I mean, not to speak about COVID, but huge challenges that are related to that, the climate change, the energy inequalities that were mentioned, also global inequalities, migrations, the fact that the global issues are interconnected. So we live in a world that has to be any issue that we face, any citizen working, I mean, I would say particularly in the field of space, but in almost any field, has to think on an issue in a global level and to look at solutions on a local level. So this is a shift. Never before society was confronted with this need of this vision. The economy and economic models are also shifting. We see big economies, but we also see that local and economies are really dependent on the big ones, but they also have to adapt to the models that are now emerging. We see different skills, different technologies that are really pushing, like, for example, artificial intelligence. Certainly one of the big changes, for example, in the space, technological advances, scientific advances. So really, in somehow the change is faster than the change at STEM at school. So how do you tackle that? OECD has this report, I don't know from you who have seen that, but it's very interesting. It's called The Future of Education and Skills, Education 2030, which they highlight that actually we have to prepare students for challenges that we don't know, for jobs that we don't exist today, because this is why that's what we are seeing, is that the jobs of in 10 years, we don't know today. Technology is really shifting. We see, for example, in space that if you see the vacancies in for example, at ESA, in the space industry are much more focused in programming, artificial intelligence, big data. And we live in societies where, for example, everything that we do depends almost on space, from interconnectivity, managing sources of electricity, managing traffic, managing, everything is really impressive. So we really have to think, okay, what do we need to equip students with? And are we, with our STEM curriculum, doing this? So also, of course, we have the 21st century skills that we all know that really focus on also on skills that before were seen as less important. We focus on the content, on the subject, but now we see that skills, and there was a very interesting survey in the UK about the needs for the UK space sector. And one of the things of this survey, it was really on the skills, on the flexibility, on the transversality, on the agency, adaptability. So this is what the space industry is telling. We need people with more of these skills. We are not seeing that we have very good students in the specific subjects, but not on key skills that are now extremely important. So we have, we really believe that space missions start at school. And this is the message in our school projects and our activities. Any space mission is an interdisciplinary mission. To build a space mission, you need engineers, scientists, lawyers, architects, administrative people, whatever you can think of the vast. You really need mathematicians. You really need the whole thing of STEM and beyond to build a space mission. So we have as space a very rich context, because we know that our missions are interdisciplinary, are really linked always to the STEM curriculum. So if we go to school and we start in biology and chemistry, I was in a meeting on Friday about molecular biology, and this has to do also with space. So we should not focus only in one or two subjects of space, because space is very vast. It includes medicine, it includes biology, it includes law, ethical aspects. Ethics is becoming more and more an important aspect when we talk about space exploration, going to the moon and beyond, ethics. So all these subjects become extremely important, and we know that space missions are per se interdisciplinary, and space has a vast array of areas. So we should not forget that space also covers a lot of navigation, telecommunication, launchers, which is where a very big workforce in Europe works and in the world. So we have started 15 years ago a network of offices that are coordinated by ESA, but they really focus on the national needs, on the national curriculum, on the national language, because of course, we could not go to a country like Austria in English. It would not make any sense, or impose something that we think is the curriculum on the European level, because the Austrian curriculum is very specific. So we really go country per country with a coordination approach, and we really kind of force the offices to work together, but still focusing on the national needs and curriculum. So we give contracts to institutions that are specialized and expert in the countries to work together. We have currently 18 offices going to 22. So you see there the list. We are working on the yellow ones. The blue ones are already implemented. So it's a very big network of offices that do things locally. Some things are very similar, but they still are adapted to the local community. And also these offices, when they start, they do an assessment report on the national trends, on the curriculum, on the needs, etc. So for example, in the UK, we have the UK ESERO that is in the STEM learning. Probably all of you know, and is an office that is working now for 13 years, and is a collaboration with UK Space Agency. And the main things that ESERO does is teacher training, because as was said before, teachers need to be trained, need to really be taught about how space can enrich their lessons. It's not teaching about space, it's how space can enrich STEM lessons. So we do CPD, we do classroom resources. For example, ESERO UK has more than 700, I think now 950 classroom resources available in this database, and we really work primarily with teachers. So we have also these 5 school projects. And why these 5 school projects? Each of them has an history. Each of them is fruit of a reflection on topics that are not covered enough by the curriculum, where they are linked to the curriculum, all of them, but they are adding a bit more. And these are skills, competence, and knowledge that are needed for the 21st century citizens. So this is a combination of a reflection between ESEROs on where they see the problems in their country, how can we help solve them. So Mission X, for example, is using astronauts. So every year we launch videos, we launch a campaign using the astronauts, men and women, to encourage students to do physical exercise and focus on nutrition. All this with the STEM component. So they have to make calculations, they have to calculate the food, the steps, analyze graphics, etc. The resources are quite STEM focused, but the challenge itself would like it's not a STEM challenge. In fact, it is. It is a physical exercise, nutrition, but with the STEM component. And this is together. This is for primary school students, really to gather the attention of primary school students to STEM in a different way. AstroPy is about programming, so the codes go to the best codes, quite a lot, go to the International Space Station, run on hardware at the International Space Station by ESA astronauts. They are sent back to Earth, and then the students analyze the codes. CANSAT is really an engineering competition. Climate Detectives is really looking to the climate, so global issues, but looking to a local reality and trying to find a solution. And MoonCamp is really inspired by exploration, learning about 3D design, which is used in many things in STEM and programming. So what is unique in this challenge is that we really focus on contact with experts on all these different topics that are working in space missions to meet students. So we organize webinars nationally and internationally where students can meet people that work in these subjects and can ask questions. So this is extremely important. So for the ESEROs, this is something actually taken from the contract. The ESEROs, we really ask the ESEROs to work with space industry and academia. This is a key task that they have to do. So they have to develop activities like role model, career awareness, knowledge sharing activities. So they have to facilitate contact with space professionals. Often the ESEROs is a collaboration, formal or informal, with the National Space Agency. So they have a lot of contacts also, of course, through the space agencies. And they do, I will show some of the initiatives. So they do a large array of initiatives with students and teachers to really provide this contact and role modeling possibilities. Another thing a little bit beyond is to gather scientific and technical advice on materials, hardware, classroom projects, really from scientists to the execution of either for the ESERO itself or for the school projects for the teams. So for example, one thing that we did, we took advantage of the COVID pandemic, where people actually at ESA were at home and they had more time. And we contacted people that did videos from home, and we call Meet the Experts. They were very popular. We did 20 videos in about 6 months with different space scientists, you see, of different color. We tried to have as many women as we could of different ages. So we really try to have videos that are very simple, that are not using a lot of jargon, to explain what scientists do in a vast array of topics. So not focusing just on the obvious, but focusing on other things, other age, so they were at home, they were quite enthusiastic. So this was something very successful, but of course this is in English. So at national level, we have this CANSAT program that every ESERO does. And what ESEROs started to do, they partner with companies. So for example, Portugal, for each of their competitions, they partner with more than 15 companies at national level. So the teams register and they match the teams where they live with local companies. And then the experts in these companies, sometimes even 3 or 4 experts support a company, a team. They really mentor the team, and they really provide not only knowledge, they provide them advice. And for the companies, they are extremely happy, because for the companies is really the connection with the local community. For example, in one of these pictures, we see here a student that is practically blind, and he could participate in the team because even the companies, they had a special scheme for employees with disabilities. So the student participated in the team, they tested the technology, and with the support of companies, actually this was possible. With just the support of the local school, this would not have been possible. So we encourage also teachers to, during the process, not only involve the team with the company, but also teachers to get to know the companies, because also teachers get to know what are the technology, what is the research that actually can be done, also with students that maybe have disabilities. And we also are very happy that some of the teams, I mean, we have had several winners of several competitions, also at European level, only girls. So this is a competition that we really ask the ESEROs to, in the way they portray the competition, although it's in engineering, they have to build up a can that will be launched at about 1 kilometer altitude by a plane or by a rocket, and measure the data, and there's a parachute. So it's an engineering, they have to build the hardware, they have to get the data, but we manage over time to get actually a lot of girls. We have about 50% of participation Europe-wide in all the national competitions. So there was an effort initially, but also with the help of the companies and with the involvement with the teachers, this was possible. Another collaboration, it was with schools, with school TVs, what we call school TV. So in many countries, there is a collaboration between public stations and school ministries of education. This is the case of the Netherlands, Portugal, Czech Republic, etc. So with the collaboration with these companies, we have developed special videos where very known journalists to youth go to space facilities and they interview space experts and they follow them like a day at work, and then develop videos. So for example, I have, you can go to the website. These are just some examples for the Netherlands. We have, the Portugal has just done 20 videos, more than 20. And they had after, because it goes on national television, then you have the parents, the teachers that go to the website of the ESERO, and they had, for example, 501,000 downloads of lessons and videos just in the last 6 months of this year. So this is huge impact. And we are also measuring also girls and boys. And what is the interesting part of television is that you can really reach students that are not just in the main cities or privileged backgrounds, etc. So we have also, in Ireland, for example, they have a tradition to do with the Institutes of Technology, these careers road shows. So students normally go in presence to institutes of technology. They meet space professionals, they meet students, PhD students, young people, 22, 23, that are doing research. They can ask questions. Now with the pandemic, this was online, but what they did, they created digital breakout rooms where students and teachers could interact with the speakers on small groups. So this was extremely successful. So it's really to break the barriers, and all this. What we see is that institutes of technology, universities, space companies are really happy to get engaged. So we see this in many countries Europe-wide. In Italy, for example, ESERO Italy developed a robotics competition with Altec. It's a company in Italy that is doing ExoMars testing. So the students could actually program rovers that were using the same exactly the same facility that is used to test real space hardware. So they were doing it remotely now with the pandemic, and it was extremely successful. I mean, the impact was huge. A lot of teams all over the country, big enthusiastic things, and they really feel that they are connected with space. And these are not always students of privilege at all backgrounds. A very important thing, like we said, is really to work with the teachers, because if we don't work with the teacher, of course, we can only reach a few students. So we really have to use the multiplier effect of the teachers. So, for example, ESERO Ireland and ESERO UK joined forces, and they created a MOOC on teaching climate change. You see that now, for example, there are 850 teachers enrolled in the course, and it's really to, of course, they talk about the project that we have, the Climate Detectives project that I mentioned before, but it's really to encourage teachers to understand more and how to teach STEM in a more attractive way. Germany too, they really look at the curriculum and how they can they use things like augmented reality, videos. So they have worked a lot with professionals to really do outstanding content that, again, focus on the curriculum. So we also use, of course, being as the European Space Station, we use in-flight calls, so live calls with an International Space Station to really encourage STEM uptake. So there is a 20-minute call with the International Space Station. We just had one month ago with Thomas Pesquet. But the ESEROs, and I have here just an example of the program of ESERO Austria. ESERO Austria did a whole program not about human space flight. It was from meteorites to CANSAT to sustainable future. Experts will do talks online and in presence with the students. And then the in-flight call is about an astronaut, but we really want to take advantage of astronaut calls to talk about the whole array of space. And this was done also in France, also in Estonia at the same time, different programs that had really a huge impact. So this we see that are really successful. And what is successful is combining topics of space and showing, okay, maybe you love astronauts, but you can be involved in other areas of space because all is connected. So finally, to finish, our perspective is really space for education. So it's not education for space, or it's not using everything that you do is not to teach about space, is to teach about STEM. Focus is really on the curriculum and on the needs, methodologies, and tools. So space is mostly used as a context. So our resources are really about biology, physics, chemistry, law, etc., mathematics. Space is the context. Space is interdisciplinary. Sometimes space is in the curriculum, but as we know, very, very, very few. And that is not the issue because space is STEM focus. Big focus on interaction with space professional from industry and academia. Big focus on diversity and inclusion. So we really try to have diversity of people also in terms of national, in terms of regions. So we really want to focus on companies and universities outside the big cities. And we really would like to help STEM education to evolve. Thank you. I stop sharing now.
Okay, thanks very much. We're running quite behind now, so I will just hand on to Chris. Chris, are you there?
Let me just share my screen in a moment.
Great.
That's the one. Okay, so I'm here to kind of represent the higher education institutes and research institutes, and as you might expect, they tend to not always be so directly involved in the younger parts of the education sector. But nevertheless, I'll give hopefully some useful perspectives, more, I guess, based on my experience than on actual kind of direct research. But I would like to start off with what I consider two very important initial key messages, which also follow up from the last presentation about space being interdisciplinary, which is to say, although I am a physicist turned engineer, STEM is not the only type of space career. A lot of them are, and it's not the only way into a space career. And to give a little bit of context for this, I work at the International Space University, and we're a little bit of an unusual institution in that we focus on what we call the 3 I's: interdisciplinary, international, intercultural. And we cover all these different disciplines. I'm not going to read each one out to you in our program. So it's STEM plus a bunch of other stuff. and this is kind of two messages, or possibly even three messages on this slide. Firstly, this shows that space is, interdisciplinary.
Chris, just to let you know, I'm not sure if you're aware, you're not sharing any slides right now.
I'm not. What's happened to them then? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for telling me. Let me have another go then. I don't know why that's not working. Can you see them now?
You're in presentation mode, but it may be just worth carrying.
No, I will. I'm really not quite sure why that is. That's bizarre.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay, right. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Well, anyway, that's the introductory slide. It's a picture of ISU, but we don't have the Soho model out there anymore. So, okay, these are the two very important messages. This is ISU. Okay, the three key aspects of ISU, the three I's, and on the right there, the list of interdisciplinary topics that we cover. But it's the next slide, I think, that has multiple messages. First of all, the range of jobs there are within the space sector. I mean, everyone always thinks of astronauts and possibly scientists and engineers, but there are all these other areas as well. You know, space anthropologists, space architects got mentioned earlier. You know, I know quite a few space architects. There are even professional space artists. And all of these people, I should say, are ISU alumni or students who've been through our master's program. Secondly, the message is you don't have to be a man to work in space. I was a little bit depressed to find out that there was still this perception, in young people. I mean, it's true that it's still tends to be a bit male dominated. But from my perception in the space sector, there's I guess up to about late 20s, early 30s, that is very much changing, and I think that will sweep on through. And then the kind of last message, if you're a university, is this: the writing in green at the top: ensure publicity material contains inclusive imagery. Again. Some years back, when I was looking to boost particularly female participation in our master's program, I consulted with an organization called Women in Aerospace Europe. And as a result of that, ISU reformulated, or at least put in place, I guess, a kind of policy so that there were, equal numbers of men and women shown in all our publicity material, and we made absolutely sure that all the women were seen doing positive things, being active, not being passive. But that's enough about ISU. I mean, based on my experience working in, universities throughout my career, well, I'm 61 now, one of the important questions is the institutional level of support. I know I have a better idea of what things are like in the UK, although I've been working in France now for 10 years. I don't have such a good picture of what it's like in other universities, but I know that in the UK, some universities, definitely have a public engagement agenda. And this is supported, right from the top of the institution. And there will be public engagement officers, certainly at the top level of the university, maybe in the various subdivisions, maybe even lower. And that can make a massive difference, because equally, I have occasionally sort of met, I remember one PhD robotics student who was very, very keen on teaching robotics as well as doing robotics and going into schools. He had a real passion for it. But he was told at the time by his supervisor, who was also the head of the department, that, to stop messing around and to focus on the research, teaching in schools, well, it wasn't going to contribute to the research assessment exercise or whatever the framework was that was being used. So if you can, convince the top level management for public engagement generally, then it will be easier to carry out other activities. And then also to follow on, more locally, by what I mean within a university, I'd like to follow up on the last talk and say, work with your ESERO. If your country has an ESERO, work with it to provide resources. Again, the model for the ESEROs in each country is very different. I took this off the UK ESERO page, but it gives you an idea of some of the things that are available. But if you have some speciality knowledge in your research as a university or as an academic, you can contribute it this way, and then you don't have to worry about it being distributed. Don't build wheels that already exist, don't build networks that already exist, connect to existing ones. Then there's other sort of fairly obvious activities such as public open days and related events, and this shows the last just before the storm of the last open day we had at ISU, in the days when we were allowed to let people into the building. And we're very keen, as part of our masters, we engage the students in this, that they have to take an active role in this. Communicating space and its value is something that we have embedded in the curriculum, and I'll come back to that a little later on. If, as a university in a particular country, you have the resources and able to, you can organize a space summer school. This is, again, since I know the UK best, this is a photo of what's called Space School UK, which has been at the University of Leicester for many, many years now, although it originally started at Sevenoaks School and then moved to Brunel University before ending up at the University of Leicester. And this provides exposure to, for teenage children to a space, to a university to start off with, so they can see what universities like, to space activities, to direct contact with a range of experts. And I know many people who currently work in the space sector. They must be in their 50s, late 40s, 50s now. And they started their space career through the early years of Space School UK 30 years ago, because it's been going for a long time. And what they did was, they went to space school, they found out more about space, they found out about what they could study, the universities and so on. And then they went off to universities. And then when they were at universities, they joined their local space society. Now, in the UK, we have this organisation called UK SEDS, which has also been going for 30 years, if not longer. It's hard to believe I used to be chair of UK SEDS many, many decades ago, when my hair was black as opposed to white. But if there is some sort of student society at the university or a national student space society, these can be used, these can be supported, these can be engaged with. UK SEDS has itself generated over the years quite a sophisticated approach to education and outreach. And again, by partnering with them, you can sort of multiply your effects. Also look for sort of non-traditional ways. This is more on the public outreach aspect, but it helps in terms of, publicizing the fact that space is going on maybe in your city. This is something that just happened a few weeks ago here in Strasbourg, where ISU partnered with an artistic organization to put on a big kind of space and cultural display in the square outside the cathedral. And the good thing was that, we didn't have to pay for it. The cultural organization did. Promote internships. Again, this will vary from country to country, depending on the university sector, depending on whether internships are seen as a mandatory part. When I used to work in UK academia, I ran a aerospace engineering, astronautics and space technology program, which was a sandwich program, or at least optionally sandwich, so students could go and spend a year in industry. But any time being exposed is important. And one of the things that's happened since I left the UK is that this SPIN program, as it's called, Space Placements in Industry, has been established to act as a central clearinghouse. This is intended primarily for university students rather than pre-university students, but the fact that it exists can be shown to school-age students to show them that there is a pathway. Then I'd like to talk a little bit about something that I found very useful. I only developed it just before I left the UK, which was to actually embed space education in the university curriculum to provide role models and ambassadors. So this was something I ran, which was intended to develop university students' communication, planning, and presentation skills. And these various good things here contribute to the university's public engagement agenda. And basically what it consisted of, and what I was allowed to do by the university, was to make this education activity, an assessed part of a degree program, by including the appropriate educational and soft skills aspects for the university students. So we called it Q-Space, Kingston University, something delivering amazing activities or something. And we set up 4-person teams of year 2 students, and each of them was facilitated by either a year 3 or a year 4 students. We got them all trained as STEM ambassadors. That's a UK scheme where people of all ages can attend a day's training and become officially recognised as a STEM ambassador. I think the terminology has changed since I was there. CRB stands for Criminal Record Bureau Checked. So anybody who's going to go and have contact with young people needs to be assessed. And that was actually one of the most time-consuming aspects of setting up the activity. And then the students themselves, designed activities and went into local schools and delivered these activities, and it got the students to reflect on what was important. And what was particularly good was that the role models provided was, I like going into schools and doing stuff for kids. It's very exciting to me, but the problem is if I do it, the message is that scientists are just kind of old white guys, which is not really a very helpful message. Whereas if you send in a bunch of 19, 20-year-olds, they're much closer in demographic, apart from age, to the school students they're teaching, and it shows. It provides these sort of role models. And this can also be extended. If I'd still been in the UK, I would have extended this scheme from with my postgraduate students to hosting, maybe student research projects, school student research projects of sorts in the university, or, mediated by the internet. And you can also simulate real space activities. This was something I've done mainly in a university context, but again, I had ideas maybe to do it with schools, because this comes back and touches on those aspects of maybe overselling space and the wonder and the glory and the excitement of space. And then sort of the more competitive aspects of space can sometimes come as a bit of a shock. So this is designed to simulate, at whichever level you want to do it, that you can't just automatically go and do something cool in space. Usually there has to be a proposal phase, there has to be some planning, you have to think about resources and budget, then you have to do it. Then you have to write a report and have it commented on, and then ideally you communicate it, the results, to the public. I've implemented this with university students in 2 ways. One was called Doing Business with ESA, where I was obviously feeling malicious, but I got the students to actually fill out the what they call the financial budget forms. These were final year, 4th year undergraduate students, so it wasn't too bad. But they did realise that there was a serious bureaucratic aspect sometimes to doing things in space. And here at ISU, we have a space request for a proposal project. Anyway, that's my 15 minutes. So thank you very much for your attention.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. If there's a way, yeah, super. We obviously only have a little bit of time left. So Chris and I, not Chris Welch, but I'm hoping this is okay with you as well. And I decided that I was just going to pull out a couple of themes and kind of lead into a couple of sort of provocations to leave the group with. So, and in looking across this and across the different talks that we've heard, I think there are, obviously a number of challenges, that everyone's rightly pointed out, but one of the biggest ones has to do with the institution of, or the field, I should say, of space science, as well as, like physics and engineering within that, as well as, the other professions that are available, obviously, as Chris Welch was mentioning. And a lot of the smaller efforts that we can make still aren't necessarily going to address some of these bigger systemic problems. So with, having schools lower the barrier, say, to A-level physics, a lot of times they're held, at least in England, to issues around league tables and school rankings. And if they don't if they, were to lower the bar for the super keen kid, that could have an impact on something that the senior management team is being held accountable for. So it's not so much a matter of convincing them as to push on some of these broader initiatives. And I would love if we had the time to hear about efforts that, for instance, Institute of Physics or any of these organizations, ESA, within the individual countries, for example, are doing to push on the wider field, whether it's in terms of policy, whether it's in terms of the broader education system, which is obviously linked into policy, but also things like industry and what, hiring practices and things like that, because that does lead me into, hiring policies of companies, because that does also lead me into this tension that's come up a lot of saying, okay, we're going to portray to people how diverse whatever field it is, physics, space science, engineering, fill in the blanks. And at this point, we also know that we're not there yet. So a lot of times people will be, is it disingenuous sometimes to promote something as a hugely diverse field where everyone is welcome, whereas at this point, that's to a certain extent an aspiration. As Chris pointed out, this is shifting, but how can we nurture the shift, if you will, rather than sort of, and some interesting approaches that I've seen that actually Professor Welch really nailed it with, was portraying the reality that it is shifting. We're trying to be more welcoming, and how can we equip people who have that passion to say, okay, what can I do to sort of deal with these structural barriers that are probably going to hit me as I move into whether it's further education or take another route or things like that. And there have been some really interesting research done around how that can be actually quite an effective strategy. And conversely, looking at things like higher education, further education, these other routes, what are ways to possibly, open up the fields a bit more in there. And like what Clara was saying about, there are all these pockets of good practice that need to be, like you're saying, localized to the country, localized to the curriculum in the different countries. It's definitely not a one size fits all. And also this idea, and as a final thing that Chris had about, encouraging public engagement. But I think the point that maybe where you kind of undersold that is that gives the opportunity for people to get to know the range of people that are there. Maybe the whole field isn't diverse yet, but there are people, in these fields, and sort of giving people the chance to get to know them, or bringing, students in to get to know what it's really like. So I think there's a lot more work to be done and a lot more unpicking to be done. And I would just leave everyone with that provocation of what can ESA, the International Space University, Institute of Physics, other organizations, funders. I know in the chat, sorry, I forget, was it Helen was mentioning like STFC, which is really making some great strides in this, I think, to push on the field, to help the people who are there already make it be a more welcoming, inclusive environment. Is it that STFC needs to have a talk with the policy, the funders need to have a talk with the policymakers around issues around how schools are judged, so that there aren't these barriers when all the people in the schools are willing and keen, but there are these larger accountability systems that they're held to. So to think a bit more creatively about how to leverage the progress that is being made, and what conversations could help move that forward, and how can organizations really push on that to change the field so that it does achieve this aspiration that we have of being more inclusive, and at the same time, and being more diverse, and at the same time helping bridge that, which in turn could help bridge that key gap between the interest and excitement that people have, and then being able to translate that into careers in that field, so that people for whom it really would be a good fit do in fact come to see it for them and pursue that. And so I will leave it with that and hand back over to Chris Stiles.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you to all the other speakers today. Thank you to Shaaron. Unfortunately, had a power cut, so she is no longer joining us, but she has sent her apologies and has said that she caught most of the speakers, so was very interested in everyone's contributions. Again, would like to thank Sam, Clara, and Chris, the other Chris, for all their very interesting contributions as well. Yes, unfortunately, we have run out of time a little bit for the Q&A and conversation part of the event, but the conversation can always continue on Facebook and a bit more easily probably on Twitter. So if you do have any comments or questions for any of our speakers, please do go over to Twitter and leave them a comment in one of the, probably in the big header or the event, the link to the video. And yeah, if our speakers have a little bit of time later on, they might be able to get around to answering just some questions through Twitter. Again, thank you to you all for joining us today. And I'll add the Twitter handle just to the chat now. But no, thank you very much for your time today. And no, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll be having more events soon. We have another one hopefully being planned in the future about alternative engagement methods. So kind of a follow-up to this webinar. But no, we'll keep you all posted, and thank you very much for joining. I'm just gonna quickly post, if anyone's interested in the Twitter handle, I will be posting that momentarily. But have a nice rest of your day, and yes, hopefully speak to you all very soon. Bye for now.